crystal chandelier of the Stafford family's luxurious reception hall cast dazzling golden light, falling coldly on the scattered prenatal DNA detection reports spread across the marble floor. The paper fluttered slightly with a faint air current, the bold black biological paternity confirmation words piercing the eyes of every person present, sharp and arrogant. Miranda stood in the center of the hall, her figure slender and delicate, her postpartum pale skin carrying a weak and pitiful haggardness, but her eyes were filled with unstoppable triumph and arrogance. She held a swaddled newborn baby in her arms, the infant sleeping soundly, unaware that he was the core bargaining chip of a despicable billion-dollar inheritance conspiracy. This child was her trophy, her passport to wealth, her final blow to completely crush me, Fiona Stafford, the legal wife of Wyatt Stafford, the rightful daughter-in-law of the top wealthy Stafford family. 3 years, for 3 long years, I had struggled with stubborn infertility. I had endured countless piercing hormone injections, undergone 7 rounds of failed IVF cycles, emptied my body's vitality, and suffered from endless physical and mental exhaustion. My uterus was empty, my body was scarred, and I had been trapped in the vicious cycle of infertile, unqualified, useless, defined by the Stafford family. During these darkest 3 years, Miranda had always been by my side. She was my most trusted best friend since childhood, the person I had shared all my secrets, grievances, and pain with. She had held my hand through every painful injection, wiped my tears after every failed operation, made me so-called nourishing tea every night, and knelt beside my bed to pray for my pregnancy devoutly. I had regarded her as my only salvation in the cold and indifferent wealthy family. I had given her unlimited trust, shared my family's internal rules with her, told her every detail of Grandpa Charles Stafford's will, and even taken her to every private physical examination of Wyatt's. I never imagined that all her companionship was a long-term disguise, all her comfort was a hypocritical performance, all her prayers were hidden curses, and all the nourishing tea she made me every night was mixed with low-dose cumulative fertility-damaging drugs, which made my already difficult fertility completely fall into a dead end. She had watched me struggle and suffer alone, watched me collapse again and again, watched me exhaust all my energy for a child, while secretly planning the most vicious betrayal in the world. She had seized the opportunity of Wyatt's annual full-body physical examination, sneaked into the private high-end clinic, disguised herself as a professional nurse wearing sterile clothes and a mask, perfectly hid her identity, and successfully stole Wyatt's pure genetic samples without anyone's suspicion. Then she quietly checked into the top-level private hospital suite next to Grandpa Charles's hospice ward, perfectly calculating the old man's dying time, and gave birth to a healthy male baby at the most accurate node. Everything was for the billion-dollar inheritance left by Grandpa Charles, the legendary billionaire who built the entire Stafford business empire. Before his death, Grandpa Charles had issued a shocking rule in front of all family elders and shareholders. The first legitimate great-grandson born in the Stafford bloodline would inherit 100% of his personal assets, including global real estate, venture capital, group equity, and private foundations, totaling more than $12 billion US, and would become the sole top heir of the Stafford family's core wealth. The entire family knew that I, Fiona, had severe fertility obstacles. For 3 years of marriage, I had no good news at all. The elders were disappointed, Wyatt was gradually alienated, and my status in the family was precarious. Miranda took advantage of this loophole, used my pain as a springboard, used stolen genes as a tool, and easily gave birth to the first great-grandson of the Stafford family. Now she stood in front of me, holding the child who stole my everything, and spoke with a false, compassionate tone that made people sick. Fiona, don't be sad. I really did all this for your own good, for the Stafford family's bloodline. Miranda lowered her eyes slightly, her voice soft and weak, as if she had endured great grievance and sacrifice. The Stafford family's inheritance has always been passed down through the single female line for generations, but your branch has always only had male descendants. The old grandpa was most worried that the bloodline would be cut off in your generation. I can't let the century-old Stafford bloodline be broken because of your physical problems. I sacrificed my body, my reputation, and my future to keep this bloodline alive for you. I stared at her hypocritical face, watching her perform the so-called great sacrifice in front of all the family elders, shareholders, and relatives present, and my heart was as calm as stagnant water, without a trace of the collapse and grief everyone expected. She raised her head slightly, a trace of suppressed pride flashing in her eyes, and added another impeccable excuse that completely whitewashed her adultery and theft. Besides, I am a traditional woman who values chastity more than life. That night 3 months ago, Wyatt got drunk and forced me. He took away my innocence. A man must be responsible for what he has done. This child is his responsibility, and also the salvation of the entire Stafford family. As for you, Fiona, she paused, her tone turning cold and condescending, like a winner mercifully pitying a loser. If you are willing to take the initiative to divorce Wyatt and leave this marriage with nothing, I can be magnanimous. In the future, I will let this child call you Aunt Fiona and let you stay in the Stafford family to enjoy the glory and wealth for the rest of your life. With a bang, she raised her white and slender palm and slapped the thick prenatal DNA paternity test report heavily on the luxurious mahogany coffee table in front of me. Several pages of reports slid down and scattered messily on the smooth marble floor. The bold and clear conclusion on the top page was shocking and eye-catching. Genetic markers confirm a biological father-son relationship between Wyatt Stafford and the infant male child. Every elder present sighed and shook their heads, their eyes full of disappointment and pity for me. The old ladies of the family whispered privately, their voices mixed with disdain and schadenfreude. Poor Fiona! After 3 years of hard work, she ended up with nothing. Her best friend took her husband and her inheritance. She is infertile after all. The Stafford family's tens of billions of assets can't be handed over to a broken bloodline. Miranda is the one who made contributions to the family. Wyatt is also pitiful. He was forced by his wife's physical problems to make a mistake. This child is the hope of the whole family. My husband, Wyatt Stafford, stood not far away, his tall body stiff, his face full of guilt and complexity. He looked at me with apology, then looked at Miranda and the child in her arms with responsibility and heaviness, completely convinced of Miranda's one-sided words. He walked towards me slowly, his voice low and hoarse, with uncontrollable exhaustion and helplessness. Fiona, I'm sorry, IT was my mistake that night. I didn't mean to hurt you. But the child is innocent, and Grandpa's will can't be violated. The family's bloodline can't be broken. If you need compensation, I can give you all my personal property. But for the sake of the child and the family, let's get a divorce peacefully. Everyone's eyes were focused on me, waiting for my collapse, my tears, my hysterical quarrel, my desperate compromise. In their eyes, I was a complete loser. I had no fertility, no child, no evidence, no reason to refute. I could only accept the fate of being abandoned, divorced, and leaving with nothing. But no one saw the change in my expression. My gaze swept over the scattered DNA reports on the floor, accurately locking onto a line of extremely small, inconspicuous gray font in the bottom right corner of the last page, a line of words that almost everyone would ignore, a loophole that Miranda had tried her best to cover up, but could not completely erase. The corners of my cold lips slowly curled up into a faint, calm, and extremely cold smile. Panic flashed across Miranda's eyes in an instant. She was keenly aware that my smile was not the helplessness of collapse, but the coldness of seeing through all lies and waiting for the final harvest. But she quickly suppressed her unease, thinking that I was just forcing a smile to save my last dignity, and raised her chin proudly again, waiting for me to bow my head and admit defeat. No one knew that for the past 3 years, I had never been simply suffering in silence. While enduring the pain of infertility treatment, I had long seen through the abnormality of my body and the weirdness of Miranda's excessive concern. I had been dormant, observing, recording, and collecting evidence silently, waiting for the day when the traitor jumped to the highest point and fell the hardest. That line of tiny words on the report was her fatal flaw, the key to completely overturning the entire farce, and the beginning of her eternal ruin. Chapter 2: The Fatal Loophole on the Fake Report. The entire reception hall was quiet. Only the shallow breathing of the newborn baby and the low whispers of the elders could be heard. The atmosphere was oppressive and embarrassing, filled with the victorious joy of Miranda and the unanimous pity for my failure. I bent down slowly, my movements elegant and calm, without any fluster or grief. I stretched out my well-maintained slender fingers and picked up the last page of the DNA report printed with a tiny gray font from the cold marble floor. The paper was slightly cold, and the font was faint, hidden under the huge paternity confirmation conclusion, extremely obscure, like a trivial system default annotation that no one would care about. But I knew exactly what this line of words meant. I held the report lightly, raised my head, and my cold eyes swept across every face present one by one. The sympathetic elders, the schadenfreude relatives, the guilty and weak husband Wyatt, and the triumphant hypocritical best friend Miranda. Everyone thinks I will cry, make trouble, collapse, and compromise, right? My voice was calm and clear, without a trace of trembling or sadness, only a cold indifference that made the noisy hall suddenly fall into dead silence. Miranda tightened her arms holding the child, forced a weak and wronged smile, and pretended to persuade softly, "Fiona, don't be stubborn. Face the reality. The child is here, the DNA report is real, and Grandpa's will is cleared, and no one can change all this." Reality. I repeated the two words lightly, the smile on my lips getting colder and more ironic. The reality you fabricated with lies, theft, and poison? My words instantly caused an uproar among the onlookers. Wyatt frowned tightly, his voice helpless. "Fiona, don't be irrational. The DNA paternity test is the most authoritative proof. It can't be faked." Yes, ordinary people can't fake it. I nodded slightly, my gaze fixed firmly on Miranda's suddenly stiff face, but Miranda can. Because she knows all my secrets, all my physical conditions, and all the hidden bloodline rules of the Stafford family that even you don't know. Wyatt. Miranda's heart skipped a beat, and her fingers holding the baby's swaddle turned white due to excessive force, but she still insisted on her innocent and weak persona. "Fiona, what are you talking about?" "I have no idea. I only did this for the family's bloodline." "How can you slander me like this?" "Slander you?" I raised the report in my hand, pointed directly at the tiny gray line at the bottom, and read it word for word clearly, so that everyone in the hall could hear every syllable accurately. Sample genetic auxiliary marker detection. The tested male infant carries a recessive sterile gene fragment that does not match the paternal Wyatt Stafford's core genetic sequence. The main paternity identification conclusion is based on conventional dominant gene matching, ignoring recessive gene deviation. As soon as these words fell, the entire hall was completely silent, and all the elders' expressions changed drastically in an instant. I continued to explain coldly, my tone steady and powerful, without any room for refutation. All core members of the Stafford family's main bloodline, from Grandpa Charles to Wyatt, have 0 recessive sterile gene fragments in their genes. This is the most fundamental genetic characteristic of the Stafford family's century-old pure bloodline, and it is also the top confidential medical file recorded in the family's private medical database. This child has a recessive sterile gene that the Stafford bloodline never has. This means a fact that everyone can understand clearly. I paused, my eyes sharp as a blade, directly piercing Miranda's completely panicked disguise, and dropped the first earth-shattering reversal of the day. This child's conventional dominant genes can match Wyatt's, which is the result of your stolen genetic samples and artificial in vitro synthesis. But his recessive genes come from another completely strange man. He is not Wyatt's biological child at all, nor is he any Stafford bloodline. He is a hybrid child synthesized by using Wyatt's stolen genes and another man's genes. Boom. The audience was completely shocked, and everyone's faces were full of incredible horror and astonishment. No one had ever thought that the authoritative DNA report that was regarded as ironclad evidence would have such a huge hidden loophole. No one had thought that Miranda's so-called bloodline salvation and accidental mistake were all premeditated, high-tech fraudulent conspiracies. Miranda's face turned pale in an instant. All the blood faded from her cheeks. Her weak and pitiful disguise completely collapsed, and her eyes were full of flustered panic that she could not hide. "You're talking nonsense. This is impossible. The report is authoritative. You're making up lies to slander me." She screamed sharply, her voice breaking, completely losing her previous gentle and weak posture. "Nonsense." I sneered, took out a mobile phone from my pocket, and directly projected a complete set of encrypted medical files on the huge LCD screen in the center of the hall. This is the full genetic detection file of all members of the Stafford main bloodline in the past 50 years, issued by the family's exclusive top private medical institution, with double encryption signatures of the hospital and the family elders. Everyone can check it at will. The Stafford main bloodline has never carried this recessive sterile gene, which is an ironclad fact. The elders stepped forward one after another, carefully checking the projected genetic files, and their faces became more and more gloomy and terrifying. Wyatt stared at the genetic data on the screen, then looked at the panicked Miranda and the sleeping child in her arms. His brain went blank for an instant, and all his previous guilt and compromise were completely shattered. I took advantage of the situation and dropped the second heavier bomb, completely crushing all her excuses. You said Wyatt forced you that night and took your innocence? Very good. I have all the monitoring records of Wyatt's private club for 3 months. On the night you said the accident happened, Wyatt attended an all-male business dinner, and the whole process was monitored. He never left the dinner venue, never met you, let alone forced you. I clicked the play button on my mobile phone, and the clear surveillance video was projected on the big screen. The time, location, and characters were all accurate and clear. Wyatt was chatting and drinking with a group of male partners throughout the whole process, with no sign of Miranda at all. The lie of the so-called forced loss of chastity was completely exposed on the spot. Miranda's whole body began to tremble violently, her legs softened, and she almost collapsed on the ground. She hugged the child tightly, her eyes scarlet, and she could no longer maintain any disguise. It's not like this. Fiona, you framed me. You have always been jealous of me. You have always hated me. You deliberately forged these evidences to ruin me. She roared hysterically, completely losing her mind. I looked at her embarrassed and crazy appearance, and my eyes were full of cold pity. Jealous of you? Jealous of you poisoning my body for 3 years, stealing my husband's genes, fabricating lies to usurp my family's inheritance? Miranda, you really overestimate yourself. Chapter 3: 3 years of poisoning, long-term premeditated murder. The farce in the hall completely reversed in an instant. The original loser's arena instantly became my exclusive face-slapping scene. All the elders who had just pitted me and blamed me now stared at Miranda with cold and angry eyes, full of disgust and fury at being deceived. I did not stop there. Since she had torn her face with me and planned to take everything from me, I would completely expose all her crimes of the past 3 years, letting her pay the price for every bit of her betrayal and poisoning. I opened another folder in my mobile phone, and more detailed and terrifying evidence was presented in front of everyone. For 3 years, every night you came to my room to make me so-called nourishing fertility tea. I was grateful for your hard work and trusted you completely, drinking every cup of tea you handed me without hesitation. But you have been adding low-dose cumulative reproductive toxic drugs to the tea all year round. The dose is extremely small every time, which will not cause acute poisoning, but it will continuously damage my ovarian function, erode my uterine activity, and completely destroy my fertility bit by bit. I projected the drug component test report and the long-term physical change monitoring data of my body for 3 years on the screen, with clear data comparison and professional doctor certification. My initial physical examination showed that my fertility was only slightly weak, which could be adjusted and cured through regular treatment. But after 3 years of your continuous poisoning, my uterine environment completely deteriorated, my ovarian function declined sharply, and multiple IVF failures were all caused by your long-term poisoning. You deliberately destroyed my fertility, made me completely lose the possibility of giving birth to the Stafford bloodline, created a dead end for me, and then took the opportunity to steal Wyatt's genes and conceive a child, perfectly completing your billion-dollar inheritance usurpation plan. Your so-called sacrifice for the bloodline is just a despicable conspiracy of poisoning, theft, and fraud. Your so-called forced loss of chastity is a complete lie fabricated to whitewash your adultery and crime. Every word I said was like a heavy hammer smashing Miranda's last line of defense. The family elders were trembling with anger. Grandpa Charles valued the family's bloodline and reputation most in his life. Miranda's behavior of poisoning the family's daughter-in-law, stealing genes, fabricating lies, and defrauding the billion-dollar inheritance was simply unforgivable, trampling on the bottom line of the entire Stafford family. The old patriarch of the family stood up trembling, his voice furious. Despicable. Shameless. How dare you use such vicious means to harm our family and defraud our inheritance? Wyatt's face was ashen and livid. He stared at Miranda, who was hysterical and embarrassed, and felt extremely disgusted and ashamed in his heart. He had just apologized to this vicious woman, had just wanted to abandon his wife for her and the fake child, had just believed her hypocritical lies. You have been lying to me all along. All your weakness, all your grievance, all your sacrifice are fake. Wyatt's voice was hoarse and incredible, filled with deep regret and rage. Miranda collapsed completely, crying and shaking her head. No, I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted a better life. I just wanted the inheritance. I grew up with Fiona. I have no parents, no background. I can only rely on myself. I'm not wrong. Her desperate defense made everyone present more disgusted. I looked at her struggling and crazy appearance and continued to drop the third fatal reversal bomb, completely sentencing her to death. You said you had no choice? You said you did all this for a living? Then let me tell everyone your real purpose and your complete plan that you have hidden for 3 years. You knew Grandpa Charles's will early. You knew that the first great-grandson could inherit tens of billions of wealth. You knew I had slight fertility problems. So you made a long-term plan. First, slowly poison me to completely cut off my fertility, then disguise as a nurse to steal Wyatt's genes, then find an unknown outsider's gene for synthetic conception, create a fake Stafford bloodline child, and finally use the child to seize the inheritance. You deliberately chose to give birth next to Grandpa's hospice ward just to let the old man see the great-grandson before his death, locking the inheritance qualification in advance. After succeeding, you pretended to be wronged and sacrificed, forced me to divorce, and wanted to take my position as the hostess of the Stafford family, enjoy tens of billions of wealth, and let me be your child's nanny for the rest of my life. Every step is carefully calculated. Every move is premeditated for 3 years. You are not forced by life. You are greedy and vicious by nature. The evidence was solid, the logic was clear, and the facts were conclusive. No one present had any doubts anymore. Miranda's legs went weak, and she knelt heavily on the cold marble floor, the child in her arms waking up and crying loudly, harsh and piercing, like a mockery of her ridiculous and failed conspiracy. Chapter 4: The Hidden Will Rule, Dimensionality Reduction Blow. Just when everyone thought that Miranda's crime was confirmed and she would be severely punished, I took a step forward and dropped the most critical and core reversal of the whole plot. The hidden rule of Grandpa Charles's will that no one knew except me. All along, everyone's understanding of the will was limited to the surface. The first great-grandson inherits all assets. But no one knew that Grandpa Charles had privately added a top-secret supplementary clause to the will before his death, which was only told to me personally, because I was the granddaughter-in-law he had always valued and trusted the most, and the only person who truly understood his ideas. Grandpa Charles had seen through the greed and coldness of the wealthy family early. He knew that countless people would covet his tens of billions of inheritance, and someone would definitely take risks and use fake bloodlines to defraud the assets. Therefore, he added an ironclad supplementary rule, which was recorded in the notarized file of the highest level law firm with absolute legal effect. All inherited bloodlines must be pure natural bloodlines conceived and born by the legal married couple of the Stafford family. Any artificially synthesized genes, stolen genes, surrogate fetuses, and third-party hybrid bloodlines are completely invalid. Once fraudulent behavior is confirmed, the perpetrator shall be deprived of all family-related rights, bear legal fraud responsibilities, and all inheritance rights shall be automatically transferred to the legal spouse who has been wronged and suffered losses. When I read this supplementary clause word for word, the entire hall fell into a dead silence again, and then burst into an earth-shattering uproar. This rule directly, completely overthrew Miranda's last glimmer of hope. Her child was an artificially synthesized hybrid bloodline, which did not meet the pure natural bloodline requirement at all. Not only could she not get any inheritance, but she was also a confirmed fraudster. And the tens of billions of inheritance that everyone was fighting for automatically belonged to me completely because of being wronged. The elders were completely shocked, and then their faces showed unanimous approval and admiration. They finally understood why the wise old grandpa had set such a hidden rule. It was to guard against greedy outsiders and internal traitors. Wyatt was completely stunned on the spot, his heart filled with endless regret and fear. He finally knew how stupid and blind he was. He almost abandoned his kind and wise wife for a vicious liar and almost let the family's tens of billions of inheritance be defrauded. Miranda knelt on the ground, staring at me blankly, her eyes full of despair and disbelief. She had planned for 3 years, endured 3 years of disguise, poisoned for 3 years, and finally ended up with nothing, and even fell into the abyss of crime. No, it's impossible. Grandpa wouldn't set such a rule. You made it up. You lied. She screamed hoarsely, her voice broken and desperate. I directly projected the original notarized file of the will's supplementary clause, with the old grandpa's handwritten signature, personal seal, and the triple notarization signature of the top law firm, which was legal and effective, absolutely impeccable. Grandpa saw your greed early on. He told me privately before his death that the bloodline inheritance is secondary, and the family's reputation and righteousness are the most important. He would never let a fake bloodline and a greedy liar inherit his life's hard work. You thought you were calculating everyone, but in fact, you've been trapped in the grandpa's precautionary layout from the beginning to the end. Your 3-year conspiracy is just a ridiculous farce in the eyes of others. I looked down at her embarrassed and desperate appearance, and my tone was cold and unmerciful. You said I would leave with nothing and let your child call me aunt? Now I tell you the final result. Your fake child has no inheritance qualification, no Stafford family identity, and no bloodline recognition. He is just an illegal synthetic fetus born from your fraud and crime. And you, Miranda, will bear all legal responsibilities for intentional injury, fraud, and theft. You will face long-term imprisonment, a lifelong criminal record, and eternal ruin of your reputation. The one who leaves with nothing is you. The one who is ruined is you. The one who kneels and repents is you. Every word was a precise blow, smashing all her illusions completely. Miranda's whole body collapsed on the ground, tears streaming down her face, crying uncontrollably, without any trace of the previous arrogance and triumph. Chapter 5: Husband's Desperate Repentance and Complete Abandonment. After completely exposing Miranda's crimes and confirming the inheritance ownership, all the eyes of the family elders turned to Wyatt, full of sternness and disappointment. As the only male heir of the Stafford family, Wyatt was irresponsible, gullible, and unable to distinguish right from wrong. He almost ruined the family's century-old reputation and lost tens of billions of inheritance assets because of his momentary confusion and weakness. Facing the eyes of everyone's condemnation, Wyatt's face was pale, and he walked towards me step by step, his tall figure completely hunched, without any of the dignity of a wealthy heir. He stopped in front of me, his eyes red with regret, his voice hoarse and humble, completely without the previous helplessness and compromise. Fiona, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was extremely wrong. I failed to see through the disguise of the traitor, failed to protect you who suffered silently for 3 years, failed to trust your grievances, and even wanted to divorce you and abandon you for a liar. I have no face to ask for your forgiveness. But I beg you, give me a chance to repent. I will do anything to make up for the hurt I caused you. I will listen to you in everything in the future, protect you with all my strength, and never make any mistakes again. He stretched out his hand tremblingly, wanting to hold my wrist, to express his endless regret and sincerity. But I took a step back coldly, avoiding his touch without hesitation, my eyes calm and indifferent, without a trace of fluctuation, no love, no hate, only complete indifference. Wyatt, it's too late for repentance. I spoke slowly, my tone firm and unyielding, announcing the final judgment on this broken marriage. For 3 years, I endured physical pain and mental torture for this family. I trusted you, relied on you, and hoped to spend my life with you. But when I was wronged and humiliated, when I was framed and bullied, when my best friend betrayed me and plotted against me, what did you do? You chose to believe the liar's words, chose to blame me for being infertile, chose to abandon me without hesitation, chose to feel responsible for the fake child of the traitor. A marriage without trust, without protection, without sincerity is not worth continuing for a second. I don't hate you anymore because you are no longer important to me. From the moment you chose to compromise with the traitor and abandon me, our marriage was completely over. Wyatt's face turned pale instantly, and his eyes were filled with terrified panic. He finally realized that I was not angry or willful, but completely disappointed and indifferent to him, completely letting go of all the feelings of the past 3 years. Fiona, don't do this. I know I was wrong. I will correct it. I will protect you for the rest of my life. Don't divorce me. He almost begged, his voice trembling, completely losing the poise of a wealthy elite. I looked at his desperate appearance, and the corners of my lips curled into a cold and ironic smile. Divorce is inevitable. But don't worry, I won't let you leave with nothing. According to the legal provisions and Grandpa's will rules, all the losses I suffered in this marriage, including physical damage, mental damage, and reputation damage, shall be fully compensated by you. From today on, you will hand over all your personal assets, all your family management rights, and all your equity income to me. You will become an ordinary member of the family with no real power, spending the rest of your life repenting for your blindness and cowardice. This is the biggest punishment for a proud, wealthy heir, depriving all his power and glory, letting him live in endless regret and self-blame for the rest of his life, watching me hold all the wealth and power of the family, and watching me live a brilliant and free life that he can never touch again. The family elders all nodded in agreement. This punishment was just and appropriate, enough to warn all family members not to be gullible and weak, and to know how to distinguish right from wrong. Wyatt stood stiffly on the spot, his whole body numb, and finally collapsed powerlessly. He knew that this was the end he deserved, and he had no right to refute or resist at all. Chapter 6 Full-Scale Public Opinion Reversal. Upper-class circle face-slapping. I did not stop at internal family sanctions. Since Miranda dared to plot against me in the upper-class circle and ruin my reputation, I would completely expose all her crimes to the entire upper-class circle, letting her be completely ruined in the social field she cared most about. I order my public relations team to sort out all the evidence. 3 years of poisoning records, genetic theft process, fake nurse disguise surveillance, fake rape lies, synthetic gene fraud evidence, and complete will clauses, and release them to all upper-class social media, financial media, and celebrity circle forums in the city. In less than an hour, the hot search headlines completely exploded, sweeping the entire wealthy circle and social public opinion. Hashtag 3 years best friend betrayal and poisoning conspiracy. Hashtag. Hashtag billion-dollar inheritance gene fraud scandal. Hashtag. Hashtag Stafford family hidden will rule exposed. Hashtag. Hashtag fake Moonlight Miranda complete collapse. Hashtag. Hashtag Fiona Stafford ultimate revenge counterattack. Hashtag. All the previous rumors that slandered me for being infertile, jealous, and incompatible with the family were completely cleared up. The whole society was shocked by Miranda's 3-year vicious conspiracy. Everyone was horrified by her deep disguise, long-term poisoning, and despicable means of stealing genes to defraud inheritance. The upper-class circle that had previously schadenfreude at my misfortune was completely stunned. All the celebrities who had privately mocked me for being a loser and a childless wife stood up one after another to apologize publicly, deleting all previous inappropriate remarks. Overnight, my reputation completely reversed from a poor, wronged infertile wife to a wise, calm, powerful, and ruthless female elite who endured humiliation for 3 years and finally counterattacked successfully. Everyone praised my forbearance and wisdom, admired my precise layout and perfect counterattack, and marveled at my ability to turn the tables in an absolute desperate situation. Miranda's reputation was completely rotten. All her social connections were cut off. All her friends' circles abandoned her. All her possible future paths were completely blocked. She became the most notorious traitor and fraudster in the entire upper-class circle, and no one would ever dare to associate with her again. The child in her arms, who was once regarded as a billion-dollar heir, became a shameful stain and criminal evidence. No family or institution would recognize his identity, and he was doomed to be entangled in the shadow of fraud and crime for a lifetime. Chapter 7 Legal Final Judgment. Zero Mercy Sanction. 3 days later, the formal court hearing was held. I submitted all complete and irrefutable evidence to the court, including long-term poisoning medical records, genetic fraud identification reports, surveillance video of disguise and theft, fake lie evidence, and well-notarized files. Miranda had no room for defense at all. All her excuses were broken by solid evidence, and all her grievances and disguise were completely torn apart. The court made a final and authoritative judgment. First, Miranda was convicted of intentional harm to the human body, long-term cumulative poisoning causing serious damage to the victim's physical health, sentenced to 5 years of fixed-term imprisonment. Second, convicted of fraudulent inheritance involving an amount of more than $12 billion belonging to an extremely huge criminal case, sentenced to 8 years of fixed-term imprisonment. Third, convicted of theft of other people's genetic information and illegal use of others' personal biological information, fined a huge amount and permanently included in the National Credit Blacklist. Fourth, all claims of Miranda and the child to the Stafford family's assets, reputation, and identity were completely invalidated, and they were permanently banned from approaching any property and personnel related to the Stafford family. Fifth, Miranda was ordered to pay me a total of $2.8 million in physical damage compensation and mental damage compensation. The combined sentence was 13 years of imprisonment, plus lifelong credit punishment, and huge compensation. The once glamorous upper-class socialite completely fell into the abyss and became a prisoner with a lifelong stain. After the judgment was announced, Miranda sat in the defendant's seat, completely numb and desperate, crying silently, without any strength to resist. She finally understood that her 3-year greed and betrayal had exchanged for a lifetime of ruin and endless regret. Wyatt attended the whole hearing, sitting in the audience with a pale face, watching a woman who had deceived him and hurt his wife being sentenced, and his heart was filled with endless self-blame and regret. After the court hearing, he took the initiative to go through all the asset handover procedures, completely handing over all his personal property, family management rights, and group equity to me, without any reservation or reluctance. He completely lost all his glory and power, becoming an ordinary family member who could only rely on me for living expenses. Chapter 8 Epilogue. $1 billion Peak. Freedom and Rebirth. Ultimate cool ending. 6 months later, I completely took over all of Grandpa Charles's $1 billion inheritance and the entire Stafford Group's management rights. With my precise investment vision and top-tier business capabilities, I reorganized the group's internal structure, eliminated redundant and incompetent personnel, expanded overseas business, and made the group's market value rise steadily, breaking the highest profit record in the family's century-old history. I completely cured my physical problems through top-tier medical technology. After conditioning for half a year, my ovarian and uterine functions fully recovered, and my physical condition was healthier and better than ever. I moved out of the old villa full of bad memories and bought a modern, bright, and luxurious independent mansion with a wide view. No cold family disputes, no hypocritical relatives, no traitorous friends, only freedom and prosperity. I completely cut off all intimate contact with Wyatt. Although he stayed in the family and tried his best to take care of me and please me every day, I always kept a cold distance. He spent every day in endless regret and self-blame, watching me become more and more brilliant and powerful, but he could never get close to me again. He finally understood that the trust and feelings I had given him for 3 years were completely exhausted by his blindness and cowardice, and there was no possibility of recovery. I became the absolute top controller of the Stafford family, the sole heir of tens of billions of wealth, the most powerful female elite in the upper-class circle. Everyone respected me, admired me, and feared me. No one dares to mention the past betrayal and humiliation again. All the rumors and prejudice have long been turned into admiration and praise for my counterattack. Occasionally, I will receive news from the prison. Miranda's life in prison is extremely difficult. She is tortured by regret every day, and she often collapses and cries in the middle of the night, regretting her 3-year greedy conspiracy. Her child is fostered in a welfare institution with no one to care for or raise him, doomed to an ordinary and humble life, and can never touch the wealth and status she once dreamed of. All the evil causes have borne bitter fruits. All the betrayal and greed have been completely punished. And I, after enduring 3 years of darkness and humiliation, finally broke free from all shackles, eliminated all enemies, seized all wealth and power, and ushered in my most brilliant and free rebirth. I once longed for friendship, marriage, and family warmth, but those trivial tenderness were all destroyed by others' greed and betrayal. Now I understand that the most reliable thing in the world is never other sincerity, but my own strength, my own wealth, and my own absolute dominance over life. The billion-dollar inheritance is not the end of my counterattack, but the starting point of my peak life. From today on, I am Fiona Stafford, standing at the top of wealth and power, walking freely in the world, with no grievances, no fetters, only glory and eternity.